Don't get caught is one of the main rules in Harry's code that Dexter lives by, but he has still come dangerously close to getting caught too many times. Today we're going to look at every time Dexter was nearly caught. Alligator Alley. Starting with one of the first huge mistakes Dexter ever made. We all know the Bay Harbor Butcher preferred to use the ocean to make his problems disappear, but before that he learned a lesson the hard way in a swamp. In season 1 episode 6 of Original Sin, the last scene shows young Dexter driving to the swamp in Alligator Alley. This is the same stretch of the Florida Everglades where he fed his first 2 victims to the alligators. This time, he's there to treat them to another snack in the form of his 3rd victim, Levi Reed. This is important. Since this is Dexter's 3rd victim, it means he is now officially a serial killer. In an earlier conversation with Harry, Dexter argued that hungry alligators were the perfect way to not get caught, but that mistake would come back to bite him. As he approaches the swamp, he's suddenly met with police officers blocking the road.
Sir, I'm gonna need you to turn around. This is an active crime scene.
Levi Reed's body was covered in the back of his truck, but how long could that hide the smell from nearby police dogs? Sure, we know nothing will happen to our favorite vigilante here, because he obviously isn't going to get caught in a prequel series, but this would go on to become one of the closest times Dexter came to getting caught. At the start of episode 7, he's stopped by an officer at the crime scene. The officer becomes suspicious about what Dexter was doing there and begins shining a flashlight around his truck. Dexter thinks fast and flashes his Miami Metro Forensics badge and pretends he's arrived to work the crime scene.
Act like I belonged.
I'm with forensics.
This quick play saves him from almost certain discovery and is one that will come in handy for him many times. Dexter successfully tricks the officer, but he's still got a body in his truck and an arm in the bayou, so he's convinced he's going to get caught. He starts thinking about food, his last meal, lethal injection, the electric chair, the whole 9 yards. Masuka makes things worse by telling him to prep the severed arm for fingerprints.
Those fingers aren't going to print themselves.
Dexter knows even a partial fingerprint could give him away, but then he sees an alligator and comes up with a brilliant plan. He accidentally falls into the swamp and feeds the arm to the hungry gator.
Morgan!
Alligator came out of nowhere.
Dexter goes from planning his last meal in prison to feeding an alligator an arm to stay out of prison. Maybe his food obsession isn't so crazy after all. The boy who saw Jesus. In season 1, episode 5 of the original series, Dexter found himself in a tense situation in a salvage yard that significantly put his dark passenger at risk of getting caught. He was there to take out Jorge and Valerie Castillo, a married couple who ran a brutal human smuggling operation out of Cuba. Dexter is limited for time, so after taking care of Jorge, he slices Valerie's carotid arteries but doesn't dismember her. While he's putting bagged remains in the trunk of his car, Dexter doesn't realize that someone is watching from inside the closed trunk of a junked Mercedes. The fact that Dexter didn't consider how exposed he could be in a salvage yard in broad daylight is definitely one of his most careless mistakes. It's obvious how much the ice truck killer had started to get under his skin. The following day, Dexter gets called back to the salvage yard, which has now turned into a crime scene. Dexter faces a horrifying reality when he finds that Valerie's body has reappeared inside the trailer.
Impossible. It had to be him. He's watching me.
This should have been impossible since he had just dumped it in the ocean. It dawns on him that someone must have been watching him, dived down to retrieve her body, and brought it back to the murder scene. Dexter suspects that the ice truck killer is behind this, which unravels him even more. Police eventually hear a noise inside the trunk of the Mercedes and find a 7-year-old boy named Oscar. He was hiding from Jorge and Valerie Castillo and has now become a risk to Dexter since he witnessed what happened. Dexter has a nightmare.
Why didn't you tell me what you are, Dex?
Which leads to him dumping his kill tools and blood slides in the ocean out of sheer fear.
I have to let go.
This is interesting because Dexter said he never dreams and always sleeps soundly, so the fact that this situation gave him a nightmare proves just how close he came to getting caught here. Luckily, Dexter is an expert at forensic evidence and how crime scenes are supposed to look. To cover his tracks, he decides to frame Jorge for his wife Valerie's murder by scraping blood from her blood slide and planting it in Jorge's socks. Then, he transfers Jorge's fingerprints to a knife, which he hides in a truck at the salvage yard.
I need a sergeant.
This is enough to convince Sergeant Dokes that Valerie's husband Jorge is the prime suspect. To top things off, a sketch artist was finally able to sketch a picture of the man Oscar saw at the salvage yard. Ironically, the sketch that could have exposed Dexter ended up saving him, because the face in the sketch looked just like Jesus. Bane of the Bay Harbor Butcher. Dexter narrowly avoids being exposed as the Bay Harbor Butcher when he cleans his boat in full view of a new security camera secretly installed by FBI Special Agent Frank Lundy. In Season 2, Episode 6, Dexter and Lundy are investigating a railroad car where a Bay Harbor butcher copycat attacked an ex-con. The scene underlines the growing tension between Dexter and Lundy. Their professional relationship starts to feel more like a ticking time bomb. Lundy tells Dexter that security cameras are being installed at several marinas.
We're hoping the cameras will turn something up. Put them in a couple of days ago to monitor for suspicious activities.
Previously in episode 5, The Dark Defender, we know Dexter was caught on camera using his boat during one of his night runs. Since the FBI knows how the butcher gets rid of bodies, Dexter couldn't be closer to getting caught. When he asks Deb why she didn't mention that they were installing security cameras at the marinas, Dexter realizes an opportunity to sabotage the video evidence of himself. Deb tells him that no one has been able to view any of the footage yet because the computer system has been busy updating. He looks around to plan his next move when he spots a fire alarm in the hallway. He quickly checks first to make sure there are no security cameras and then pulls the alarm.
New Dexter's stuck in high school. Maybe I am a late bloomer.
As soon as he pulls the alarm, everyone starts evacuating and Dexter seizes the moment. He quietly sneaks into Lundy's office and deletes the video footage of himself like it never happened. The dirty cop versus the dark defender. The suspense surrounding Dexter's potential capture intensifies considerably during season 5. After the traumatic events surrounding Rita's murder, he struggles with his responsibilities as both a father and a vigilante. The tensions begin when Detective Quinn can't let his suspicions go and hires a corrupt ex-cop named Stan Liddy to dig up dirt on Dexter.
Might have a job for you. Looking into someone. Who? Guy I work with.
Quinn has made some pretty bad decisions in the show, but this would turn out to be one of his worst. Liddy worked in Miami Metro's narcotics division, but was recently busted by LaGuerta during a sting operation and was suspended. He gets closer to the secrets Dexter is hiding, and it becomes clear that Liddy is the reckless, dirty cop that Detective Quinn could one day turn into. As Quinn gets closer to the truth, he starts to feel guilt for having Dexter investigated because of his feelings for Deb. When Liddy is doing anything he can to get reinstated on the police force, Quinn seems to be doing anything he can to get kicked off of it. Liddy ends up kidnapping Dexter and tries to force a confession by showing him incriminating footage.
I know you're thinking I got no reason to make a full confession, so I'm gonna give you a reason. Lumen walks free.
Things take a deadly turn when Dexter kills Liddy in his van. When Quinn shows up looking for Liddy, he doesn't realize that both Liddy's body and Dexter are inside the van. A small drop of Liddy's blood drips out of the van onto Quinn's shoe as he walks away. This would help to incriminate Quinn instead of Dexter for Liddy's death. When the police arrive, LaGuerta notices the blood on Quinn's shoe, making him the main suspect.
That looks like blood.
To help him, Dexter tampers with the evidence to make sure Quinn doesn't take the fall and to inspire him to back off. It works, and Quinn personally thanks Dexter for helping him.
Thank you. Just doing my job.
The contrast between Detective Quinn and Liddy, the dirty cop, was clear here. Liddy had just been busted in a sting by his coworkers, while Quinn had just been saved by a coworker. One minute Quinn is investigating Dexter for his wife's murder, and then suddenly Quinn is being investigated for Liddy's murder. Dexter forcing Quinn to become an ally who would owe him a favor was a brilliant next-level chess move. The Lumen Project. Throughout season 5, Dexter becomes entwined with a woman named Lumen Pierce when he encounters her imprisoned by a killer named Boyd Fowler. Lumen is seeking revenge against a group of men who raped and abused her, and Boyd is one of them. She comes into Dexter's life at a time when they're both vulnerable. Dexter is picking up the pieces while mourning the loss of his wife to the Trinity Killer, and Lumen is almost completely broken after the horrifying tortures that killed every other woman who was previously in her shoes. Lumen witnesses Dexter kill Boyd, and this is a huge problem for Dexter because someone has seen his true self as a serial killer, and it's never gone well when someone learns about his dark passenger. Dexter and Lumen's relationship evolves into a complex partnership, and that is when things get riskier than they ever have for him. Even though helping Lumen shows a new level of empathy for Dexter, she ends up causing nothing but problems for him and almost gets him caught twice. The first time is in a warehouse Lumen uses to try to kill one of her abusers. She has just shot him and thinks she killed him, so she calls Dexter for help. Dexter shows up and asks if anyone saw her entering the warehouse, and Lumen says she isn't sure.
Did anybody see you?
I don't think so.
You killed somebody.
Because you wouldn't do it for me.
This scene underlines the reason why Dexter should have ultimately never mentored Lumen to be a killer like him. Dexter has been mastering his secret vigilante skills for his entire adult life, and being able to stay in the shadows and make smart decisions is something that has become second nature to him. It definitely helped being raised by a detective father, Harry, who had worked with Dr. Evelyn Vogel to instill the code in Dexter from an early age. Lumen was brand new at this and had become a rogue loose cannon that was not seeing clearly due to the psychological torment of her abusers. She put herself in a dangerous situation that could have easily ended with her being being hurt or killed and having it lead back to Dexter. You would think Dexter would have learned his lesson from the crash and burn of Miguel Prado, the assistant DA who Dex was also trying to mentor to become a vigilante killer like him, but ultimately failed. Miguel was too emotional and reckless to handle it, as well as too focused on getting revenge against someone he hated. You would think Dexter would recognize the same blind rage in Lumen, but he's been blinded by his own need for closure after getting his wife Rita killed. When Dexter scolds Lumen like a child for not listening, she tells Dexter he can just go if he doesn't want to help.
Just go if you want to go.
I'm responsible for you. Everything you do leads right back to me.
When she brings him to where she thought her victim's body was, it's just a puddle of blood and the body is now gone. Lumen yells at Dexter to not get mad at him, but Dexter can barely hide his frustration and tells Lumen to do him a favor and stop talking. The most frustrating thing about the situation Lumen has put them in is knowing how easily avoidable it was. Dexter was right to try to get Lumen to go back home to Minneapolis because she was inexperienced and likely suffering from severe PTSD symptoms. Someone in this state wouldn't make clear decisions and could easily let emotions cloud their judgment. This is obvious when Lumen starts telling Dexter how she found the man she just shot.
I thought that they spotted me there, so I went back to that same bar night after night.
She says she went back to the bar where she was first abducted by the men, hoping one of them would come back. She wore a disguise so they wouldn't recognize her, waited for one of them to show up, and then started flirting with him so he would want to leave the bar with her. She says they got in his car and she pulled out her gun to force him to drive. The problem is that Lumen did not even have a plan for where to take him and only picked the warehouse because it seemed deserted. She says she marched him inside and Dexter asks if that's when she shot him. She replies, "No, I asked him for the names of the other men. He called me a cunt, then I shot him."
I asked him for the names of the other men. He called me a cunt. Then I shot him.
This is where Dexter realizes that Lumen is more of a liability than he thought and is not thinking clearly. Luckily, Dexter spots a bloody handprint on a post in a nearby payphone, and he begins spraying luminol to track the blood trail since it will make the blood display a blue glow. This is when Dexter gets a text from Miami Metro Dispatch alerting him to a crime scene at the Baywater Marina warehouse where they are. They realize that patrol cars are outside and homicide detectives are on the way. Dexter begins to understand the level of his mistake, and the entire situation is summed up by his internal monologue.
This started out as an ordinary day. In 1 second, everything changed. Lumen happened.
Finally, they locate where the man is hiding in an area beneath the floor, and he immediately plays innocent. He claims he's never seen Lumen before and has a normal life with a wife and daughter.
My name's Dan. Dan Mandel. This one right here.
He shot me.
I got a wife. I got a daughter.
Lumen lets her emotions get the best of her again, and Dexter pulls her aside to tell her that she's ruining his life. It's at this time they hear whispering and realize Dan grabbed Lumen's cell phone and used it to call one of the other abusers to warn them about Lumen. He tells her they're gonna find her, and then Dexter snaps his neck. Dexter runs to his car so they can move the body. At this time, Deb and Masuka both arrive at the scene and find the puddle of blood near the entrance. Masuka tracks the blood trail like Dexter did, and they begin closing in. Dexter changes his clothes in his car so he can pretend that he just arrived at the scene. He sends Lumen off to get a cab, and suddenly, the man who Dexter was trying to take out before Lumen called him starts waking up in the back of the car. In one of the most amusing scenes in the show, we see the victim fully wrapped in plastic start running away from Dexter's car, with Dexter running close behind him. The man was 2 seconds away from being spotted by Deb and Masuka, who were shining their flashlights just around the corner. He drags the man away by the plastic sheeting around his neck at exactly the last second. Then he sets up the crime scene to make it look like his victim shot Dan the dentist in a situation that Masuka famously calls autoerotic mummification.
Autoerotic mummification.
Dexter is able to avoid one of the most anxiety-inducing times he's ever almost been caught. Tick, tick, tick. The climax of season 5 shows Dexter's desperation to maintain his secrecy as he narrowly avoids getting caught for the second time helping Lumen. He faces threats from Jordan Chase, a famous motivational speaker and the ringleader of the men who abused Lumen. Dexter stalks Jordan at one of his seminars and formulates a plan with Lumen to take him down. Unfortunately, Jordan has made a plan of his own. He manages to trick Lumen, ties her up, and puts her in the trunk of his car. Dexter calls Jordan to try to negotiate to save her, but it doesn't work. He decides to call the Office of County Records to track down any properties under Jordan's real name, Eugene Greer.
There's one property belonging to a Eugene Greer, River Jordan camp for boys and girls.
While stopped at a traffic light, a fruit vendor hears a banging from the trunk of Jordan's car and alerts the police. Deborah investigates, learning that the car was headed towards a camp. Despite knowing it's a trap, Dexter heads to the camp and goes to rescue Lumen. Jordan captures Dexter, holding him at gunpoint and throwing him down some stairs. In a critical moment, Dexter uses a missing knife from his set to stab Jordan in the foot, securing him to the floor. They then overpower Jordan, with Lumen delivering the final blow after his confession.
Used to just cower and cry.
It's for everyone that you hurt.
The tension peaks when Deb arrives at the scene just as Dexter and Lumen are cleaning up. She holds them at gunpoint through a plastic sheet, which prevents her from identifying them clearly. In a surprising twist, Deb decides to let them go.
In an hour, this place will be swarming with police. If I were you, I'd be gone by then.
Dexter's luck and the obscured vision through the plastic sheet save him from being exposed by his sister. This allows Dexter and Lumen to escape with Jordan's body and dump it in the open sea. LaGuerta. Captain Maria LaGuerta was known for playing political games to climb the ranks, but deep down she was still a determined detective. In Season 7, Episode 1, she finds a bloodslide at the crime scene linked to the Doomsday Killer, Travis Marshall. This discovery was significant because it connected back to the Bay Harbor butcher case where Sergeant Dokes was wrongly accused of the murders years before. Finding another bloodslide at an active crime scene years after Dokes' death meant that the Bay Harbor butcher was still active. This discovery led LaGuerta to revisit the case. She aimed to clear Sergeant Dokes' name because she never believed it was him. Her investigation soon pointed towards Dexter Morgan as the real Bay Harbor butcher due to his forensic background and inconsistencies in his past actions. To trap Dexter, she frees Hector Estrada from prison, knowing Dexter would go after him because Estrada murdered his mother and took away any chance at a normal life. She knew that there was a 0 chance Dexter would be able to resist putting him on his table. The irony is, while LaGuerta climbed the ranks by bulldozing over others, her attempt to do the right thing by clearing Dokes' name leads to her downfall. She arrests Dexter at his home, but he uses his forensic expertise to twist the situation around.
Your desperate need to believe that James Dokes you knew, or thought you knew, wasn't a cold-blooded killer. You were his partner. But if you couldn't see what was right in front of your eyes, what does that say about you?
This manipulation would play into the doubts people already had about her motives. Tista in particular has been a victim of LaGuerta's manipulation tactics before, so he immediately sides with Dexter.
Why is Dexter in handcuffs? Dokes is the Bay Harbor butcher. Have you lost your mind?
This twist not only frees Dexter from immediate suspicion, but also puts LaGuerta in a position where her professional integrity in the case is questioned. Realizing LaGuerta wouldn't stop her pursuit of the truth, Dexter sets up what he thinks will be the end game in a shipping container, like the one his mother was killed in. He's about to kill LaGuerta and make it look like she died in a shootout with Estrada when his sister Deb unexpectedly walks into the scene. In a tense and chaotic moment, LaGuerta wakes up from the tranquilizer since Dex had only given her a half dose. In the confusion, Deb is caught between her loyalty to her brother and her duty as a police officer. She ends up shooting LaGuerta in the heat of the moment despite Dexter surrendering and telling her, "Do what you gotta do."